Hello, hello. You know what time it is. Ha! Get into it! Hey! What's going on, y'all? It is a beautiful Monday night here in Yellow Springs. Let me grab my remote because this is a little bit louder than what I thought. I do not own the music that is playing in the background, but we need this ominous feel. Because we're about to meet a character in the world of the Chronicles of Narnia that will probably give young children nightmares. So, on a serious note, for any parents that have kids watching this next chapter is going to be very scary, especially in the beginning, the way that I describe this character that we are going to meet that has been mentioned multiple times before in previous Narnia books in reference to the people of Calormen and the god that they worship. So if you know what I'm talking about, comment below. Reed's ginger beer is amazing. It's not alcoholic. It gives me life. And thank you, Matt Gutierrez. Thank you, Fred. Love you too. Alright. I hope everybody's having a really good day. As I always say, like, share, subscribe. You do not have to watch these videos when they go live. And now, y'all, I figured out a way to get all my videos from my Facebook to the YouTube channel easily with no issues. So I'm very happy about that. But without further ado, we are going to begin our reading for tonight. And then we're pretty much, after these next two chapters that we finish, we are pretty much halfway through the book at that point. And so after that, we're definitely going to read some Alice in Wonderland. Definitely going to start that Redwall series I've been hyping up before the summer is over. And I more than likely, with audience participation, will read... So, if anybody remembers an older video from at least a few months back... Hold on one second. Excuse me. I have Choose Your Own Adventure books. And I would love to read those books. But I need live audience participation. So what I will do is make an announcement for a specific day where I will read the book. And with whoever is watching, we will choose how the story goes. And there's multiple endings. And the book I have right now that I really want to read is the Magic of the Unicorn, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, I miss you too. Thank you. I always love doing this because I feel like I'm channeling my inner Sailor Moon. Like, Moon, Prince of Power, make up! If they made a Sailor Moon novel, I would totally read it. But I don't know if there is such a thing. I don't know if there is a novel. But if anybody can find it for me, you let me know. Enough of my silliness. Let's get into the story. Chapter 8. What news the eagle brought. In the shadow of the trees, on the far side of the clearing, something was moving. It was gliding very slowly northward. At first glance, you might have mistaken it for smoke, for it was gray and you could see things through it. But the deathly smell was not the smell of smoke. Also, this thing kept its shape instead of billowing and curling as smoke would have done. It was roughly the shape of a man, but it had the head of a bird, some bird of prey, with a cruel curved beak. It had 4 arms which held high above its head, stretching them out northward as if it wanted to snatch all Narnia in its grip, and its fingers, all 20 of them, were curved like its beak and had long, pointed bird-like claws instead of nails. It floated on the grass instead of walking, and the grass seemed to wither beneath it. After one look at it, Puzzle gave a screaming bray and darting into the tower, and Jill, who was no coward as you know, hid her face in her hands to shut out the sight of it. The others watched it for perhaps a minute until it streamed away into the thicker trees on their right and disappeared. Then the sun came out again and the birds once more began to sing. Everyone started breathing properly again and moved. They'd all been still as statues while it was in sight. What was it? said Eustace in a whisper. I have seen it once before, said Tyrion, but that time it was carved in stone and overlaid with gold, and it had solid diamonds for eyes. It was when I was no older than thou, and had gone as a guest to the Tisrock's court in Tashbaan. He took me into the great temple of Tash. There I saw it carved upon the altar. So that, right there, is a glimpse at the evil god of Tashbaan, the god Tash, who is the antithesis to Aslan. That thing was Tash? Said Eustace. But instead of answering him, Tyrion slipped his arm behind Jill's shoulders and said, How is it with you, lady? All right, said Jill, taking her hands away from her pale face and trying to smile. I'm all right. It only made me feel a little sick for a moment. It seems then, said the unicorn, that there is a real Tash after all. Yes, said the dwarf, and this fool of an ape who didn't believe in Tash will get more than he bargained for. He called for Tash. Tash has come. Where has the thing gone to? Said Jill. North into the heart of Narnia, said Tyrion. It has come to dwell among us. They have called it, and it has come. Ho, 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 chuckled the dwarf, rubbing his hairy hands together. It will be a surprise for the ape. People shouldn't call for demons unless they really mean what they say. Who knows if Tash will be visible to the ape, said Jewel. Where has Puzzle got to? Said Eustace. They all shouted out Puzzle's name, and Jill went round to the other side of the tower to see if he had gone there. They were quite tired of looking for him when at last his large gray head peered cautiously out of a doorway, and he said, Has it gone away? And when at last they got him to come out, he was shivering the way a dog shivers before a thunderstorm. I see now, said Puzzle, that I really have been a very bad donkey. I ought never to have listened to Shift. I never thought things like this would begin to happen. If you spent less time saying you weren't clever and more time trying to be as clever as you could, began Eustace, but Jill interrupted him. Oh, leave poor old Puzzle alone, she said. It was all a mistake. Wasn't it, Puzzle, dear? And she kissed him on the nose. Though rather shaken by what they had seen, the whole party now sat down again and went on with their talk. Jewel had little to tell them. While he was a prisoner, he had spent nearly all his time tied up at the back of the stable and had of course heard none of the enemy's plans. He had been kicked and beaten and threatened with death unless he would say that he would believe it was Aslan who was brought out and shown to them by firelight every night. In fact, he was going to be executed this very morning if he had not been rescued. He didn't know what had happened to the lamb. The question they had to decide was whether they would go to Stable Hill again that night, show Puzzle to the Narnians, and try to make them see how they had been tricked, or whether they should steal away eastward to meet the help which Runewith the centaur was bringing up from Cair Paravel, and return against the ape and his Calormans in force. Tyrion would have very much liked to have followed the first plan. He hated the idea of leaving the ape to bully his people one moment longer than need be. On the other hand, the way the dwarves had behaved last night was a warning. Apparently one could be sure how people would take it if even he had showed them Puzzle. And there were the Calorman soldiers to be reckoned with. Poggin thought there were about 30 of them. Tyrion felt sure that if the Narnians all rallied to his side, he and Jewel and the children and Poggin would have a good chance of beating them. But what if half the Narnians, including all the dwarves, just sat and looked on, or even fought against him? The risk was too great. And there was, too, the cloudy shape of Tash. What might it do? And then, as Poggin pointed out, there was no harm in leaving the ape to deal with his own difficulties for a day or two. He would have no Puzzle to bring out and show now. It wasn't easy to see what story he, or Ginger, could make up to explain that. If the beast asked night after night to see Aslan, and no Aslan was brought out, surely even the simplest of them would get suspicious. In the end, they all agreed that the best thing was to go off and try to meet Runewith. As soon as they had decided this, it was wonderful how much more cheerful everyone became. I don't honestly think that this was because any of them were afraid of a fight, but I dare say that each of them, deep down inside, was very glad not to go any nearer, or not yet, to that horrible, bird-headed thing which, visible or invisible, was now probably haunting Stable Hill. Anyway, one always feels better when one has made up one's mind. Tyrion said that they had better remove their disguises, as they didn't want to be mistaken for Calormans and perhaps attacked by any loyal Narnians they would meet. The dwarf made up a horrid-looking mess of ashes from the hearth and grease out of the jar, which was kept for rubbing on swords and spearheads. Then they took off their Calorman armor and went down to the stream. The nasty mixture made a lather just like soft soap. It was a pleasant, homely sight to see Tyrion and the two children kneeling beside the water and scrubbing the backs of their necks or puffing and blowing as they splashed the lather off. And they went back to the tower with red, shiny faces, looking like people who had been given an extra good wash before a party. They rearmed themselves in true Narnian style. Oh, excuse me. Oh, pardon me. Ooh. Hi, Joe. Hi, Debbie. With straight swords and three-cornered shields. "Body of me," said Tyrion, "that is better. I feel a true man again." Puzzle begged very hard to have the lion skin taken off. He said it was too hot and the way it was rucked up on his back was uncomfortable. Also, it made him look silly. But they told him he would have to wear it a bit longer, for they still wanted to show him in that get-up to the other beasts, even though they were now going to meet Runewit first. What was left of the pigeon meat and rabbit meat was not worth bringing away, but they took some biscuits. Then Tyrion locked the door of the tower, and it was the end of their stay there. It was a little after 2 in the afternoon when they set out, and it was the first really warm day of that spring. The young leaves seemed to be much further out than yesterday. The snowdrops were over, but they saw several primroses. The sunlight slanted through the trees, birds sang, and always there was the noise of running water. It was hard to think of horrible things like Tash. The children felt this was really Narnia at last. Even Tyrion's heart grew lighter as he walked ahead of them, humming an old Narnian marching song, which had the refrain, "Ho, rumble, 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 rumble drum belabored." After the king came Eustace and Poggin the dwarf. Poggin was telling Eustace the names of all the Narnian trees, birds, and plants which he didn't know already. Sometimes Eustace would tell him about English ones. After them came Puzzle, and after him Jill and Jewel, walking very close together. Jill had, as you might say, quite fallen in love with the unicorn. She thought, and she wasn't far wrong, that he was the shiniest, delicatest, most graceful animal she had ever met. And he was so gentle and soft of speech that if you hadn't known, you would have hardly believed how fierce and terrible he could be in battle. "Oh, this is nice," said Jill, "just walking along like this. I wish there could be more of this sort of adventure. It's a pity there's always so much happening in Narnia." But the unicorn explained to her that she was quite mistaken. He said that the sons and daughters of Adam and Eve were brought out of their own strange world into Narnia only at times when Narnia was stirred and upset. But she mustn't think it was always like that. In between their visits there were hundreds and thousands of years when peaceful king followed peaceful king, till you could hardly remember their names or count their numbers, and there were really hardly anything to put into the history books. And he went on to talk of old queens and heroes whom she had never heard of. He spoke of Swan White, the queen who had lived before the days of the White Witch and the Great Winter, who was so beautiful that when she looked into any forest pool, the reflection of her face shone out of the water like a star by night for a year and a day afterward. He spoke of Moonwood, the hare, who had such ears that he could sit by Cauldron Pool under the thunder of the great waterfall and hear what men spoke in whispers at Cair Paravel. He told how King Gale was ninth in descent from Frank the First of all kings, had sailed far away into the eastern seas and delivered the Lone Islanders from a dragon, and how in return they had given him the Lone Islands to be a part of the royal lands of Narnia forever. He talked of whole centuries in which all Narnia was so happy that notable dances and feasts, or at most tournaments, were the only things that could be remembered, and every day and week had been better than the last. And as he went on, the picture of all those happy years, all the thousands of them, piled up in Jill's mind till it was rather like looking down from a high hill into a rich, lovely plain, full of woods and waters and cornfields, which spread away and away till it got thin and misty from distance. and she said, "Oh, I do hope we can settle the ape and get back to those good ordinary times. And then I hope they'll go on forever and ever and ever. Our world is going to have to end someday. Perhaps this one won't. Oh, Jewel, wouldn't it be lovely if Narnia just went on and on, like what you said it has been?" "Nay, sister," answered Jewel. "All worlds drawn to an end, except Aslan's own country." "Well, at least," said Jill, "I hope the end of this one is millions of millions of millions of years away. Hello, what are we stopping for?" The king and Eustace and the dwarf were all staring up at the sky. Jill shuddered, remembering what horrors they had seen already, but it was nothing of that sort this time. It was small and looked black against the blue. "I dare say," said the unicorn. "From its flight, that is a talking bird." "So think I," said the king. "But it is a friend, or is it a spy of the apes?" "To me, sire," said the dwarf, "it has a look of Farsight the eagle." "Ought we to hide under the trees?" said Eustace. "Nay," said Tyrion, "best stand still as rocks. He won't see us for certain if we moved." "Look, he wheels. He has seen us already," said Jill. "He is coming down in wide circles." "Arrows on string, lady," said Tyrion to Jill, "but by no means shoot till I bid you. He may be a friend." If only one had known what was going to happen next, it would have been a treat to watch the grace and ease with which the huge bird glided down. He alighted on a rocky crag a few feet from Tyrion, bowed his crested head, and said in his strange eagle's voice, "Hail, king!" "Hail, Farsight," said Tyrion, "and since you have called me king, I may well believe you are not a follower of the ape and his false Aslan. I am glad of your coming."
"Sire," said the eagle, "when you have heard my news, you will be sorrier at my coming than of the greatest woe that ever befell you."
Tyrion's heart seemed to stop beating at these words, but he set his teeth and said, "Tell on." So, there are our merry adventurers. Yeah, that's what Puzzle looks like in his lion skin.
"Two sights I have seen," said Farsight. "One was Cair Paravel filled with dead Narnians and living Calormans. The Tisrock's banner advanced upon your royal battlements, and your subjects flying from the city this way and that into the woods. Cair Paravel was taken from the sea. 20 great ships from Calormen put in there in the dark of the night before last night."
No one could speak.
"And the other sight, 5 leagues nearer than Cair Paravel, was Runewit the centaur lying dead with a Calormen arrow in his side. I was with him in his last hour, and he gave me this message to give to your majesty. To remember that all worlds draw to an end, and that noble death is a treasure which no one is too poor to buy."
"So," said the king after a long silence, "Narnia is no more." Thank you, Nomad. We're gonna go on to the next chapter. I told you, y'all, this story is sad. It is dark. It is sad, but the payoff is worth it. Just bear with me, please. Thank you, Sable. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for everybody that's been watching. Appreciate y'all. Oh, and Nomad, if you're not doing anything Wednesday, I'm off. Chapter 9, The Great Meeting on Stable Hill. For a long time, they could not speak or even shed a tear. Then the unicorn stamped the ground with his hoof and shook his mane and spoke, "Sire, there is no need of counsel. We see that the ape's plans were laid deeper than we dreamed of. Doubtless he had been long in secret traffic with the Tisrock. As soon as he had found the lion skin, he sent him word to make ready his navy for the taking of Cair Paravel and all Narnia. Nothing now remains of us 7 but to go back to Stable Hill, proclaim the truth, and take the adventure that Aslan sends us. And if by a great marvel we defeat those 30 Calormans who are with the ape, then to turn again and die in battle with the far greater host of them that will soon march from Cair Paravel. Tyrion nodded, but he turned to the children and said, "Now, friends, it's time for you to go hence into your own world. Doubtless you have done all that you were sent to do." But we've done nothing," said Jill, who was shivering, not with fear exactly, but because everything was so horrible. "Nay," said the king, "you loosed me from the tree, you glided before me like a snake last night in the wood and took Puzzle, and you, Eustace, killed your man, but you are too young to share in such a bloody end as we others meet tonight, or it may be 3 days hence. I entreat you, nay, I command you, to return to your own place. I should be put to shame if I let such young warriors fall in battle on my side." "No, no, no," said Jill. "We won't. I don't care what you say. We're going to stick with you whatever happens. Aren't we, Eustace?" "Yes, but there's no need to get so worked up about it," said Eustace, who had stuck his hands in his pockets. "Because, you see, we haven't any choice. What's the good of talking about our going back? How? We've got no magic for doing it." This was very good sense. But at that moment, Jill hated Eustace for saying it. He was fond of being dreadfully matter-of-fact when other people got excited. When Tyrion realized that the 2 strangers could not get home, he next wanted them to go across the southern mountains into Archenland where they might possibly be safe. But they didn't know their way, and there was no one to send with them. Also, as Poggin said, once the Calormans had Narnia, they would certainly take Archenland in the next week or so. The Tisroc had always wanted to have these northern countries for his own. In the end, Eustace and Jill begged so hard that Tyrion said that they could come with him and take their chance. Or, as if he were more sensibly called it, the adventure that Aslan would send them. The king's first idea was that they should go back to Stable Hill. They were sick of the very name of it by now, till after dark. But the dwarf told them that if they arrived there by daylight, they would probably find the place deserted, except perhaps for a Calorman sentry. The beasts were far too frightened by what the ape had told them about this new angry Aslan, or Tashlan, to go near except when they were called together for those horrible midnight meetings, and Calormans were never good woodsmen. Poggin thought that even by daylight they could easily get round to somewhere behind the stable without being seen. This would be made much harder to do when the night had come and the ape would be calling the beasts together and all the Calormans were on duty. And when the meeting did begin, they could leave Puzzle at the back of the stable, completely out of sight, till the moment at which they wanted to produce him. This was obviously a good thing, for their only chance was to give the Narnians a sudden surprise. Everyone agreed, and the whole party set off a new line, northwest toward the hated hill. The eagle sometimes flew to and fro above them. Sometimes he sat perched on Puzzle's back. No one, not even the king himself, except in some great need, would dream of riding on the unicorn. This time Jill and Eustace walked together. They had been feeling very brave when they were begging to be allowed to come with the others, but now they didn't feel brave at all. "Jill," said Eustace in a whisper, "I may as well tell you, I've got the wind up." "Oh, you're all right, Eustace," said Jill. "You can fight, but I'm just shaking, if you want to know the truth." "Oh, shaking's nothing," said Eustace. I'm feeling like I'm going to be sick." "Don't talk about that, for goodness sake," said Jill. They went on in silence for a minute or two. "Jill," said Eustace presently. What, she said. "What'll happen if we get killed?" "Well, we'll die, I suppose." "Well, but I mean, what will happen in our world? Shall we wake up and find ourselves back in the train? Or shall we just vanish and never be heard of anymore? Or shall we be dead in England?" "Gosh, I never thought of that." "It'll be rum for Peter and the others if they saw me waving out the window, and then when the train comes in we're nowhere to be found. Or if they found two... I mean, if we're dead over there in England." "Ugh," said Jill. "What a horrible idea." "It wouldn't be horrid for us," said Eustace. "Shouldn't be there. We shouldn't be there. I almost wish..." "No, I don't," said Jill. "What were you going to say?" I was going to say I wish we'd never come, but I don't. Even if we are killed, I'd rather be killed fighting for Narnia than grow old and stupid at home, and perhaps go about in a bath chair and then die in the end just the same. Or be smashed up by British railways. Why do you say that? Well, when that awful jerk came, the one that seemed to throw us into Narnia, I thought it was the beginning of a railway accident. So I was jolly glad to find ourselves here instead, which, pausing for a second, y'all. Please pay attention to what Eustace just said. Please pay attention to that. Pardon me. Allergies, y'all. Well, when that awful jerk came, the one that seemed to throw us into Narnia, I thought it was the beginning of a railway accident. So I was jolly glad to find us here instead. While Jill and Eustace were talking about this, the others were discussing their plans of becoming less miserable. That was because they were now thinking of what was to be done this very night, and the thought of what had happened to Narnia, the thought that all her glories and joys were over, was pushed away to the back of their minds. The moment they stopped talking, it would come out and make them wretched again. But they kept on talking. Ooh, excuse me. Poggin was really quite... Thank you. Really quite cheerful about the night's work that they had to do. He was sure that the boar and the bear and probably all the dogs would come over to their side at once, and he couldn't believe that all the other dwarfs would stick to Griffle, and fighting by firelight and in and out among trees would be an advantage to the weaker side. And then if they could win tonight, need they really throw their lives away by meeting the main Calorman army a few days later? Why not hide in the woods or even up in the western wastes beyond the great waterfall and live like outlaws? And they might gradually get stronger and stronger, for talking beasts and Archenlanders would be joining them every day. And at last they'd come out of hiding and sweep the Calormans, who had been quite careless by then, out of the country, and Narnia would be revived. After all, something very like that had happened in the time of King Miraz, aka Prince Caspian. Remember we read that. And Tyrion heard all of this and thought, but what about Tash? And felt in his bones that none of it was going to happen, but he didn't say so. When they got nearer to Stable Hill, of course, everyone became quiet. Then the real woodwork began. For the moment at which they first saw the hill to the moment at which they arrived at the back of the stable, it took them over 2 hours. It was the sort of thing one couldn't describe properly unless one wrote pages and pages upon it. The journey from each bit of cover to the next was a separate adventure, and there was a very long waits in between, and several false alarms. If you are a good scout or a good guide, you will know already what it must have been like. By about sunset, they were all safe in a clump of holly trees about 15 yards behind the stable. They all munched some biscuit and laid down. Then came the worst part, the waiting. Luckily for the children, they slept for a couple of hours, but of course they woke up when the night grew cold. And what was worse, woke up very thirsty and with no chance of getting a drink. Puzzle just stood, shivering a little like nervousness, and said nothing. But Tyrion, with his head against Jules' flank, slept on as soundly as if he were in his royal bed at Cair Paravel, till the sound of a gong beating awoke him, and he sat up and saw that there were firelight on the far side of the stable, and knew that the hour had come. "Kiss me, Jewel," he said, "for certainly this is one last night on earth, and if ever I offended you against you in any matter, great or small, forgive me now." "Dear King," said the unicorn, "I could almost wish you had, so that I might forgive it. Farewell. We had known great joys together. If Aslan gave me my choice, I would choose no other life than the life I have had, and no other death than the one we go to." Then they woke up Farsight, who was asleep with his head under his wing, and crept forward to the stable. They left Puzzle, not without a kind word, just behind it, telling him not to move till someone came to fetch him, and took up their position at one of the stables. The bonfire had been lit for long, and was just beginning to blaze up. It was only a few feet away from them, and the great crowd of Narnian creatures were on their other side of it. so that Tyrion could not at first see them very well. Though of course he saw dozens of eyes shining within the reflection of the fire, as you've seen a rabbit's or cat's eyes in the headlights of a car. And just as Tyrion took his place, the gong stopped beating, and from somewhere on his left, 3 figures appeared. One was Rishta Tarkhan, the Calorman captain. The second was the ape. He was holding on to the Tarkhan's hand with one paw and kept whimpering and muttering, "Not so fast, don't go so fast. I'm not at all well. Oh, my poor head. These midnight meetings are getting too much for me. Apes aren't meant to be up at night. It's not as if I were a rat or a bat. Oh, my head." On the other side of the ape, walking very softly and stately, with his tail straight up in the air, came Ginger, the cat. They were heading for the bonfire, were so close to Tyrion that they would have seen him at once if they had looked in the right direction. Fortunately, they did not. But when Tyrion heard Rishta say to Ginger in a low voice, "Now, cat, to thy post. See thou play thy part well." "Meow, meow, count on me," said Ginger. Then he stepped away beyond the bonfire and sat down in the front row of the assembled beasts in the audience, as you may say. For why, really, as it happened, the whole thing was rather like a theater. The crowd of Narnians were like the people in the seats. The little grass place just in front of the stable where the bonfire burned and the ape and the captain stood to talk to the crowd was like the stage. The stable itself was like the scenery at the back of the stage, and Tyrion and his friends were like people peering round from behind the scenery. It was a splendid position. If any of them stepped forward into the full firelight, all eyes would have been fixed on him at once. On the other hand, as long as they stood still in the shadow of the end wall of the stable, it was 100 to 1 against their being noticed. Rishta Tarkhan dragged the ape up close to the fire. The pair of them turned to face the crowd, and this, of course, meant that their backs were toward Tyrion and his friends. "Now, monkey," said Rishta Tarkhan in a low voice, "say the words that wiser heads have put into thy mouth, and hold up thy head." As he spoke, he gave the ape a little prod or kick from behind from the point of his toe. "Do leave me alone," muttered Shift, but he sat up straighter and began in a louder voice. "Now listen, all of you. The wickedest thing that has ever done in Narnia, and Aslan—" "Tashlan, fool," whispered Rishta Tarkhan. "Tashlan, I mean, of course," said the ape, "is very angry about it." There was a terrible silence while the beasts waited to hear what new trouble was in store for them. The little party by the end wall of the stable also held their breath. What on earth was coming now? "Yes," said the ape, "at this very moment, when the terrible one himself is among us, there in the stable just behind me, one wicked beast has chosen to do what you think no one would dare to do it. He were 1,000 miles away. It was dressed itself up in a lion skin and is wandering about these very woods, pretending to be Aslan." Jill wondered for a moment if the ape had gone mad. Was he going to tell the whole truth? A roar of horror and rage went up from the beast. "What? Who is he? Where is he? Just let me get my teeth into him." "It was seen last night," screamed the ape, "but it got away. It's a donkey, a common, miserable donkey. If any of you see that donkey, we will. He'd better keep out of our way." Jill looked at the king. His mouth was wide open, and his face full of horror. And then she understood the devilish cunning of the enemy's plan. By mixing a little truth with that, they had made their lie far stronger. What was the good now of telling the beast that the donkey had been dressed up as a lion to deceive them? The ape would only say, "That's what I've said." What was the good of showing them Puzzle in his lion skin? They would only tear him to pieces. "That's taken the wind out of our sails," whispered Eustace. "The ground is taken from under our feet," said Tyrion. Cursed cleverness," said Poggin. "I'll be sworn that this new lie is of Ginger's making." And that is where we will end tonight, because next time we're here Wednesday, we will be on chapter 11. And let me tell you, it's going to get very, very, very interesting quickly. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, you do not have to watch these videos when they go live. Like, share, subscribe, enjoy yourself in your downtime. Play it for your kids so they can go to sleep with a gentle voice to waft them into the late hours of the night to soothe wonderful dreams. Had a eyelash fall on my eye. But I'll see you next time, y'all. Peace, love, and hair grease. I'll see you soon.